Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you are watching this video, whether you're watching live with me right now or whether you are watching a recording. Welcome, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here today, and also congratulate you on being interested in self-development and making improvements in your lives. We all can, no matter how advanced we are, no matter how good we're doing in life, there's always things that we could be doing better, not because we have to in order to, prove ourselves, but because the nature of being human, it really is about growth and feeling like we're continually growing. So what I'm going to be talking about in this next class in my series of teaching self-development, brain-based self-development tools for Self-Improvement Month is NLP, which stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. And basically that translates to the language of the mind. You can think about it as being similar to computer programming. And there's certain code that has been developed, and being able to write the right code to identify the bad code that's producing the unsatisfactory output in a computer, changing the code or upgrading the code. Sometimes the operating system is old, outdated, and sluggish. And so upgrading the operating system helps that computer to work better and to be less problematic, have less glitches, etc. So our mind is the same way. It oftentimes gets bogged down with pop-ups, viruses, little things that have sort of snuck in there, and pop-ups, viruses, outdated, old operating systems, bad code that was maybe useful in its day, but is kind of outdated now or no longer useful. And so NLP is a language that works with how we've been able to identify that the majority of people store, code, process, recall, respond to different stimulus, most of which is tied into our senses, and being able to work with that structure and that code and sort of those rules to clear out things that are producing results that we're not happy with and introduce in things that are going to be more conducive to the results that we want to create. So that's basically what NLP is about. And it was developed in the 1970s by two gentlemen, Richard Bandler and, I always forget the two names, Richard Bandler and John Grinder. Thank you, memory. And they based the techniques that they came up with on modeling successful people, therapists, business people, etc., people who are very successful in their fields, to try to identify what were the common denominators, what were the common things that they did or the way that they thought that helped them to create the success that they had in their fields. And so this is kind of what an element of NLP that's called modeling. And one of the ways that we learn, especially when we're children, is through modeling, through observing other people and mimicking what we see them doing. And generally, if we're doing the same thing that other people are doing, we're going to get the same results. Not always, but in general. So as children, we learn a lot of what we do through observing and replicating the behaviors of the people around us, especially our parents, people in our family unit, etc. And then as we get out into the world a little bit more, our friends and peers, classmates, teachers, other authority figures, etc. So modeling is one of the attributes tied into NLP. There's other things that I'll just briefly touch upon today, but today I'm just really going to teach you one particular NLP technique that can be really beneficial for helping to change your attraction to certain things such as foods and instill more of an attraction towards something else that you want to be able to be more attracted towards because you feel like it's more beneficial to what you want to get. So I utilized this technique, and I actually first learned when I was learning NLP. This was one of the tools that I used in my health and weight loss journey to change my behaviors, lose weight, finally keep it off after struggling for so many years since puberty. This was a technique that worked really well for me and that I've taught to my clients over the past 25 years since I've been doing this personal development work, utilizing techniques like hypnosis, NLP. That's when I got certified in NLP about 24 years ago. And I've been teaching classes on some other techniques as well, but NLP was the second technique that I learned and utilized. And actually, I started learning it from Tony Robbins. If you might have ever heard of Tony Robbins, the very well-known success coach. He's been used by presidents, star athletes, Hollywood elite, military generals. So he's got an extensive list of A-list people that he's worked with. And he actually learned NLP when he was young, in his 20s, and it took off for him, and he created another field because it was trademarked. So he calls it neuro associative conditioning. One of my mentors calls it psycholinguistics. Again, it's basically all the same thing and these different techniques that you can learn. So tonight I'm going to be teaching you the resource organizer technique to help to become less attracted to certain things like substances. You could also use this with people that you want to be less attracted towards, and even go a step further and instill more of an attraction towards things that you want to be more attracted to. Let's see. I think there was, in terms of the NLP, I was mentioning about the modeling. So modeling is one of the techniques that is taught in NLP. There's a couple of things like anchoring, which is the brain just naturally anchors things, creates associations between things. So it's sort of like that stimulus response trigger that happens. So something some kind of stimulus, either something we see, something we hear, something we do or feel, and then a little bit less so, but we can also have triggers and create anchors through our sense of smell and our sense of taste. So the gustatory and the olfactory. But the three main senses that we process through and learn through are the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Kinesthetic is the feeling or doing of things. So those are some of the principles tied into NLP. Oftentimes we tend to process information more strongly through one of those or one or two of those. So when I'm working with my clients, because I incorporate NLP in with the hypnosis that I do, there are some questions that I ask a client to help to elicit if they are more dominant in one of these three processing systems, or if they're fairly even, or if there's maybe two that they're more dominant in, or one that they're less dominant in. Generally, as a culture, Americans are less dominant in the auditory, more dominant in the visual, and sort of in between on that kinesthetic. And so that's, if a lot of people tend to process, understand, and recall information or experiences better if they've seen it or read it, versus if they've just heard it or if they've done it, right? So oftentimes you remember things more clearly if you've actually done it, or even visualized doing it. So those are some of the elements of the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And then we've got the, so that's tied into the anchoring. And I mentioned about the modeling. Then we've got some other things like rapport building, being able to create a good communication and connection between people. It's what we call building rapport. You can use NLP techniques to help to increase your rapport building with other people. And one of the ways that we do that is what we call matching and mirroring. So matching is you see what they're doing, you do the similar things. You breathe like they're breathing, you breathe at the same pace that they're breathing in, you are doing similar movements that they're doing. Mirroring is sort of like you do the opposite. So if you're looking in a mirror, it's kind of the opposite. And it seems kind of obvious when you know that you're doing it with somebody else, but they often don't really pick up on it, but it causes their mirror neurons in their brain to recognize that there's a similarity. And so similarity, we tend to be naturally more drawn to and feel more comfortable with people who we feel are similar to us. So these mirror neurons in our brain actually can pick up on similar patterns that people have to ours, and that tends to make us to feel more acclimated towards them, safer with them, more drawn to them. So for example, if somebody went like this, within a few seconds, I might do something like touch my chin. If they cross their legs, I would cross my legs the same way, or mirror, I would cross them, but the opposite way. If they are talking at a certain tone, I could match that tone. If they were talking at a certain speed, I could talk that speed. So if they're talking faster, then I might speed up my talking as well. And they would unconsciously recognize that same speed. Or somebody talks much more slowly. And so then I might start to talk more slowly like them as well. So a lot of different things we can do with that to match and to mirror. So what I want to teach you tonight is the resource organizer technique, which I mentioned, and it will help you, again, to be drawn towards something that you want to be more drawn towards, or move away from and be less drawn towards, less attracted to something that you don't want to. So let's just use, for simplicity's sake in this example, maybe it's a certain kind of food, such as chocolate or French fries or something like that. One of the principles of NLP is generally the things that we are more attracted to, we store in a particular way. And the things we're less attracted to, we store in a different way in our brains. The things that we store in these particular ways causes us to, one, remember them more, and two, be more emotionally triggered by them. So what we're trying to do is decrease that emotional triggering and attraction, to decrease that, and to have less of that similarity and strength of the association that our brain has made to that certain type of food. So if you think about it this way, there tends to be, if we're looking at something that's close to us versus further away, we tend to be more drawn to and notice more that thing that's closer to us than that thing that's further away to us, right? So right now, which of my hands are you tending to notice more? The one that's here in the foreground or the one that's in the background? Probably the one that's in the foreground, right? It's closer to you. Something that's bigger versus something that's smaller. And again, if we got that distance, that tends to happen. So if something's closer to you, it tends to be seen as bigger. Something further away tends to be seen as smaller because of our, our peripheral vision. Which do you notice more? The thing that's moving or the thing that's still? If you're like most people, it's the thing that's moving. Which you tend to notice more or get more drawn to? Something that's in color or something that's in black and white? Generally, it's going to be the thing that's in color, unless it's just so starkly different than anything else. So if everything around you is in color and there's something that's black and white, oftentimes that's going to, because it's so different, it will tend to stand out more. But in general, something that's in color versus something that in black and white, we're more drawn to, has more emotion attached to it. So those are some of the visuals. And then there's kinesthetic, which is movement. The feel of something, right? If we're feeling something versus we're just trying to think about the feel of something, we're more likely to be drawn to something that we can actually feel versus just imagining. The sound of something. So if something is high pitched or the volume is very high, we're going to tend to notice that more than something that's soft or low pitched or soft volume. And if that sound feels like it's closer to us versus the sound feels like it's further away, which again tends to also influence the volume, but not necessarily. Trying to think of some other things. So you're kind of getting the idea, and I want you to have this scenario in your mind. If you're watching a scary movie and you are watching that scary movie in your home in a very well lit room on a TV that's way across the other side of the room, that it's a very small TV instead of these, big flat screens that people tend to have now, right? So it's back there, it's small, you're in a well lit room, you're watching the movie, the sound is down low versus really, high volume. And the reception isn't that great. So the picture isn't that clear, maybe a little bit fuzzy. And instead of being a black and white a color movie, it's black and white. So you're watching that movie in your home, brightly lit room, small TV, way across the room. The reception is fuzzy. It's black and white. The sound is low. Versus if you were watching that same exact movie in a dark movie theater and the music is in surround sound, so you can actually kind of feel the vibrations of the music or the sound. It's full color, full Technicolor. This huge screen in front of you and you're close to the screen. Which one do you think is going to draw you in more, that you're going to be more likely to jump, right? And if that music is playing and it matches the kind of the scene that you're watching, it's sort of like creepy kind of music versus lighthearted music. So you're more likely to get drawn towards that movie, to respond to the things in the movie in the theater environment, big screen, close to you, Technicolor, full surround sound, dimly lit, versus the same movie in the other scenario in your home with the opposite kinds of stimulus. So that's a quick little example of the process of the coding within our brain. Tend to notice more things that are moving versus still, colorful versus black and white, close to us versus far away, big versus small, high pitched or loud volume, soft pitched, low volume. I think I covered everything there. So if we are wanting to change our attraction towards a certain food, and we know that we tend to get less drawn to things that are still black and white, small, far away. Oh, and that we're in the movie versus watching it, right? Or we're recalling the memory as if we're in it versus recalling the memory as an observer, seeing it from a distance as if someone made a movie of it and we're watching it on a TV or a movie theater screen versus we're experiencing ourselves within it. We're seeing it through our eyes, hearing it through our ears, sensing and feeling it with our body versus being disassociated, watching it from a distance, observing, hearing it, etc., from a distance. So if you are wanting to be less attracted to a particular food, close your eyes and imagine for a moment that you can see that food and then you shrink it down smaller and smaller. So it looks like dollhouse size. You move it further away. You make a black and white photo image of it instead of being like in a movie. If there's any sounds associated with it, you turn down those sounds or you just totally turn it off so it's silent. As it moves further away, it's getting smaller, it's getting fuzzier, fainter, right? It's less appealing to you if you're now thinking about the food with those changes in what we call those submodalities of the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, versus if that food is right up in your face, right? And it's, lots of color, etc. to it. So it just takes a little bit of practice to imagine that food. Close your eyes, see that food as you normally would, where you're feeling attracted to it, and then start to change all those aspects of it. The size, the location, the distance, the movement, the color, the clarity. If there are any sounds associated with it, changing the sound in some way, turning it down, turning it off, or even something that's incongruent. So like with the scary movie, that sort of scary music, if you're watching that same scene and it had jazz playing or cartoon music or something lighthearted, wouldn't create the same response for you. So that's an example of how to lessen the attraction to that. And if you do that numerous times, your brain is going to start to remember the new ways that you've been thinking about it and recalling it. And so with repetition, or if we do this in the hypnotic state where you can instill the new modalities of that food much deeper and much more quickly, pretty soon you'll find yourself less and less drawn to that food. You can also think about where you store that in your mind. So if I say point to, if you think about that food, point to where it comes to you from. So it might, like, you might go, oh, it shows up kind of here in my mind visually over here. So that's where your brain tends to store it. If you imagine storing it over here, that can also change the elements and the attraction of it, along with those other things that I just mentioned. And then for something that you want to be more attracted to, what do you do with it? As you close your eyes and you think about that thing you want to be more attracted to, maybe it's, maybe it's lettuce or salads or fish or something like that. Close your eyes and introduce that food in your mind, the images, the size, the distance, the color, all of that, with the stronger ones, the ones that create stronger emotion and attraction for us. So colorful, close to you, what kind of smell you could associate with that. So again, you can bring in the smells if you're working with something like food. The distance, the clarity, right? Bring all of that in. Maybe even attaching another positive thing with it, another food that you do enjoy. So those two are associated together. So those are a couple of different things that you can do with the food to become more attracted to it. And for foods that you want to become less attracted to, you do the opposite with. So that's the resource organizer technique. You can also do that with memories. So memories that you want to be less drawn towards, have less of a reaction, emotional reaction to remember less. You can close your eyes, pull up that memory, and start to play around with all those different modalities of it. And for a memory or even an activity that you want to be more drawn towards, say such as exercise, you can imagine yourself exercising and do all those things that turn up the good feelings and associations to the exercise so that you're more likely to be drawn to it and want to do it. So it's a quick explanation of the resource organizer technique and how you can start to do it. Again, it takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of repetition before your brain starts to recode it in the new way. But if you incorporate it in with hypnosis, like I do with my clients, so when I put them in a hypnotic state, there's a lot of different things that I can do with them in terms of techniques to help them to create the change that we're looking for. And sometimes I'll use an NLP technique like the resource organizer if we're working on changing their food preferences, or we're helping to diminish the emotional response to an old negative memory and to instill a more positive response to something new that they want to imagine themselves being able to do in the future. Hope you enjoyed this lesson today. If you would like a copy of this video because you'd like to review it again and you watched it live, or because you missed the live recording and you would like to view it, you can just send me an email to lisa@themindtrainingcenter.com, and I'll be happy to send you a link to the video so that you can view it and find yourself making benefit of the technique. Have a great night, everyone.